This is a new day filled with sound and light and expectation. This is a new day that has been waiting just for you. This day has been waiting especially for you, to embrace you, to guide you. This day has been waiting with open arms just for you. This day is a new day that has been waiting just for you. It's a new day. Let's not waste it.
Make channels for the streams of love where they may broadly run, and love has overflowing streams to fill them everyone. But if at any time we cease such channels to provide, the very founts of love for us will soon be parched and dry. For we must share if we would keep this gift all else above. We cease to give, we cease to have. Such is the law of love.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Youngstown, UUYO, which is a place where time, place, and spirit intersect. We are at 1105 Elm Street, virtually now, at approximately 11:05 a.m. And we welcome people from the Mahoning Valley, the wider world, and in the words of Woody Guthrie, this church is your land, this church is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. I'm Melissa Smith, and I would like especially to welcome our guest minister of the day, Christina Spouty, who many of you know from the time that she was our interim minister and sabbatical minister from 2014 to 2016. Christina has since been awarded a degree from Meadville Lombard Theological Seminary in 2016 and was previously a graduate of Kent State University, where she studied history and French and Russian translation. Christina's passions are intersectionality, working with community building, dismantling systems of oppression, time banking, sexuality education, community building, theology, sciences, linguistics, history, and especially learning. One of her favorite current practices is cross stitching. Her happy place is being in the water, and she loves to swim. She occasionally runs as well. Reverend Christina is delighted to uh, serve as the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Spring, Florida. Um, I would draw your attention to the many announcements which are in the order of services, uh, the weekly update. And just relevant today, there will be no religious education service We will resume with religious education next week. At the end of this service, uh, we will have a meeting of the newcomer circle uh, handled by uh, Karen Lapidus, and that will be you will be given a breakout room to join Karen after the service.
Good morning. I would like to share my generational journey narrative, and it's titled Lola's Story from the Present to the Past. I will open with a question. Who am I? Who am I? My response is I'm a person of faith. It is faith that has brought me this far in my journey, and it is faith that will take me through the next phase or steps of my journey that Father God has planned for me and mine. Who am I? My response is I am a proud and a blessed person of color, and we do matter. It is the collective voices of all that will help to ensure people of color will receive the equal social justice they deserve. I am also a great grandmother of nine. I'm sorry, a grandmother of nine and a great grandmother of four and a mother of two. Today, I'm going to take you through my generational journey narrative. Here is my generational journey narrative that is only a reflection of my mother's side of the family. I am the daughter of Willie G. Lewis, whose sunrise was in 1993, his sunset was in 2000, and Clausel Davis Lewis. Her sunrise was in 1936, and her sunset was in 1999. Their occupations stem from farming, steel worker. My father worked for Youngstown Sheet and Tube when he when he migrated from Alabama to Chicago, then to Ohio. My mother, she worked at Lordstown as assembly worker, and she was also an educator in the Youngstown school system. I am the great granddaughter of Frank Davis Jr., whose sunrise was 1914, and his sunset was in 2002. He was known as FK because there were so many family members named Frank Davis, so his nickname was FK. And Luella Grant Davis, who was known affectionately by us as Madia. Her sunrise was in 1916 and her sunset was in 2010. Their occupations respectively was farming. My grandfather was a forklift operator for the Diamond Concrete Pipe Company in Diamond, Ohio. And my grandmother, who also was in Ohio, she worked at Sears and Roebuck in the janitorial service part of it. And she also did janitorial service while she was in Alabama at the Dandyfield Air Force Base. Upon moving to Ohio, she primarily worked for Sears, and she was also a domestic worker for several families in the Youngstown area. I am the great granddaughter of Pastor Frank Davis Sr., whose sunrise was in 1887, his sunset was in 1964, and his wife, Mittie Bracy Davis, whose sunset is in 1893. Her sunrise was in 1891, and her sunset was in 1916. Their occupations, respectively, he was a minister of the Little Rock Creek Baptist Church in Hope Hall, Alabama, primarily cotton farming and timber harvesting. And my great grandmother, Mittie Bracy, was a midwife and a nanny. I am the 2 times great granddaughter of Lewis Davis Sr., whose sunrise was in 1859, whose sunset was in 1914, and Sylvia Brooks Davis, whose sunrise was in 1880 and whose sunset was in 1922. And they primarily did cotton farming, general labor, and she was also a midwife. I am the 3 times great granddaughter of Tony Hill Davis Jr., whose sunrise was in 1838 and his sunset is unknown, and Betty Davis, whose sunrise was in 18 46, whose sunset was unknown, occupation farming and merching. I am the 4-time great-granddaughter of Tony Hill Davis, whose sunrise was in 1818. Both of his birth parents, and his birth name is unknown, but his both parents are both of African descent. And then also Lizzie Davis, whose sunrise was in 1822. Her sunset is unknown. Both of her birth parents are of Native American descent. They were both land stewards. A little bit about Tony Hill Davis. The soldiers of the roots of my beginning, which I stand, was a freed slave, one who was not in servitude or in debt to others, who hid on a British ship that docked in Georgia. He and his family migrated from Georgia to Alabama. He was classified as a tax slave. This is the method in which slavery was kept alive and thriving, and a new form of slavery. Because he was able to escape that classification by living with the Creek Nation, he married and had 5 children with my great-grandmother, Lizzie, a Native American of Creek descent. With that being said, we will light the chalice in the spirit of healing in honor of the Native Americans and the land in which we stand. We stand on the Erie and the Wahashari Maha Nation, which is the Osage Orange Native American. Thank you.
Please join with me in reading the covenant of this church. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning, Youngstown. It is so good to be here with you. And in true Reverend Christina fashion, I have a story to share with you this morning. The story is called We Are Water Protectors. It's by Carol Lindstrom and illustrated by Michaela Goad. Water is the first medicine, Nokomis told me. We come from water. It nourished us inside our mother's body, as it nourishes us here on Mother Earth. Water is sacred, she said. We stand with our songs and our drums. We are still here. The river's rhythm runs through my veins, runs through my people's veins. My people talk of a black snake that will destroy the land. Spoil the water, poison plants and animals, wreck everything in its path. When my people first spoke of the black snake, they foretold that it wouldn't come for many, many years. Now the black snake is here. Its venom burns the land, courses through the water, making it unfit to drink. Take courage. I must keep the black snake away from my village's water. I must rally my people together. to stand for the water, to stand for the land, to stand as one against the black snake. We stand with our songs and our drums. We are still here. It will not be easy. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, the winged ones, the crawling ones. The four-legged, the two-legged, the plants, trees, rivers, lakes. The earth. We are all related. Tears like waterfalls stream down, tracks down my face, tracks down my people's faces. Water has its own spirit, Nukamus told me. Water is alive. Water remembers our ancestors who came before us, she said. We stand with our songs and our drums. We are still here. We are stewards of the earth. Our spirits have not been broken. We are water protectors. We stand. The black snake is in for the fight of its life. At the end of the book, there are notes from Carol Lindstrom and Michaela Goad, and I'm going to read part of Carol Lindstrom's note to give some additional context and information. She writes, there is an Anishinaabe prophecy that speaks of two roads. One is a natural path. It leads to a global peace and unity that embraces the sacred relationship between humanity and all living things. On this path, all orders of creation, mineral, plant, animal, and human, are relatives deserving of respect and care. We are instructed to use our voices to speak for those who have not been given a voice. On this path, there is no black snake. The earth is not damaged, and the grass grows lush and green. This prophecy, known as the Seven Fires prophecy, says that if humans choose the natural path, then we will proceed toward peace and unity and a healthy Mother Earth. The other road is described as a hard-surfaced highway where everything moves faster and faster at an unimaginable speed. On this path, humans embrace technological advancement with little regard for Mother Earth. Many native nations believe this path is symbolized by the oil pipelines, the black snakes that crisscross our lands, bringing destruction and harm. The path leads to a damaged earth. The prophecy is coming to life right before our eyes. Water affects and connects us all. We must fight to protect it.
Each month, we give 100% of our offering to an organization that supports the life of our community. This month, UU's Give Away the Plate recipient for November is the Midlothian Free Health Clinic. The Midlothian Free Health Clinic is located inside First Presbyterian Church of Youngstown and provides medical services to individuals in need of care. The clinic believes that everyone has a right to quality health care provided by health professionals which treat patients with dignity, respect, and compassion. The clinic believes patients are more than their disease. They are individuals with unique histories, values, and character. The clinic believes that medical providers must be more than technicians. They must be healers of the mind, body, and spirit. To treat only physical illnesses will not solve the problem in the long run. The approach of the Midlothian Free Clinic centers on the fact that healing is a team effort, and physicians, medical and non-medical staff, and patients must all work together in order for healing to occur. The clinic provides hope for the hurt, healing for the suffering, medications for the sick, and treatment for people who are ill. The clinic is open the second and fourth Thursday evenings from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. In a time when access to medical care is so important, Youngstown is fortunate to have an organization like the Midlothian Free Health Clinic available to provide services and support to residents who need it. We will now receive the offering that supports the life of Youngstown, the Mahoning Valley, and our wider world.
Joseph's face was black as night. The pale yellow moon shone in his eyes. His path was marked by the stars of the southern hemisphere, and he walked his days under African skies. This is the story of how we begin to remember. This is the powerful pulsing of love in the vein. After the dream of falling and calling your name out, these are the roots of rhythm, and the roots of rhythm remain. In early memory, mission music was ringing around my nursery door. I said, take this child, Lord, from Tucson, Arizona. Give him the wings to fly and harm me, and he won't bother you no more. This is the story of how we begin to remember. This is the powerful pulsing of love in the vein. After the dreaming of falling and calling your name out, these are the roots of rhythm, and the roots of rhythm remain. Ka-tumba, tumba, tumba, whoa. Ka-tumba, tumba, tumba, whoa. Joseph's face was black as night, and the pale yellow moon shone in his eyes. His path was marked by the stars of the southern hemisphere, and he walked the length of his days under African skies.
Please join me in a moment of meditation and centering yourselves.
Our reading this morning comes from Linda Hogan, who is a poet, writer, academic, and member of the Chickasaw Nation. It was the time before I was born. I was thin. I was hungry. I was only a restlessness inside a woman's body. Above us, lightning split open the sky. Below us, wagon wheels cut land in two. Around us were the soldiers, young and afraid, who did not trust us with scissors or knives, but with needles. Tear dresses, they were called, because settler cotton was torn in straight lines, like the roads we had to follow to Oklahoma. But when the cloth was torn, it was like tears, impossible to hold back. And so they were called by this other name for our weeping. I remember the women. Tonight they walk out from the shadows with black dogs, children, the dark, heavy horses, and worn out men. They walk inside me. This blood is a map of the road between us. I am why they survived. The world behind them did not close. The world before them is still open. All around me are my ancestors, my unborn children. I am the tear between them, and both sides live.
that you land on. The earth is just a dead thing you can claim, but I know every rock and tree and creature have a spirit, have a rock, and have a name. You think the only people who are people are the people who look and think like you. But if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you'll learn things you never knew, you never knew. Have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon? Or ask the grinning bobcat why he grinned? Can you sing with all the voices of the mountain? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Come run the hidden pine trails of the forest. Come see the sweet berries of the earth. You roll through all the echoes that surround you, and the voice, you wonder what they're worth. The rainstorm and the river are my brothers. The heron and the otter are my friends, and we are all connected to each other in a circle, in a hoop that never ends. Does the sycamore grow? If you cut it down, then you'll never know. And you'll never hear the wolf cry to the blue corn moon, or whether we are white or copper skinned. We need to sing with all the voices of the mountain, need to paint with all the colors of the wind. You can own the earth and still all you'll own is earth until you can paint with all the colors of the wind.
It was a hot mid-June day, a day I was likely thinking about going swimming. But a course I was taking in seminary called Global Religions and Their Progressive Expressions had a requirement to participate in or witness an experience of another religious tradition. A worship service was a common choice, but it could have been any event, service, or ceremony. I had plenty of options there in Northeast Ohio and had planned on one, but on a whim, I asked on Facebook for recommendations or unusual activities that might be interesting. A friend, a Lakota man I know, also a member of a UU church, said that he was going to be performing an adoption ceremony in a couple of weeks, and I was welcome to attend. The ceremony was that mid-June day, and I remember hoping that where we were going would have air conditioning, or we were likely all going to be a bit uncomfortable. And as we arrived, my husband at the time and we were welcomed into the house. I explained to someone that we had been invited by Bruce, and we were thanked for coming. Although no one ever really questioned why we were there, we were simply welcomed. In anticipation of the ceremony, we had brought tobacco, and I gave this to someone. People introduced themselves, offered us drinks, let us know where the bathroom was. Essentially, everyone there that day was Indigenous, other than the young man to be adopted, his girlfriend, some of his family who were present, and my husband and I. A First Nations community had formed among Lakota, Winnebago, Dakota, Onondaga, and other peoples to celebrate and share community together, practicing and honoring them and their ancient ways, or in this case, recreating them when they had been lost, stolen from them by genocide and assimilation into whiteness, stolen from them by people who look like me. My experience that day as someone so very clearly an outsider to their cultures, to their heritages, to their community, their family, was also one of true welcome and hospitality. My husband and I, together or separate, were rarely left alone with no one from the community to talk with. I was brought into conversations quickly, conversations about work lives and family lives, about traveling to visit relatives on reservations, and never once felt like I didn't belong or that I wasn't welcome or really that I wasn't an expected guest. My husband and I were included as participants in the adoption ceremony. A young white man who had been exploring and learning about his Indigenous heritage through his grandmother, being adopted by the Lakota woman who had become his second mother. Everyone there received gifts. We all shared the food people had brought, including many traditional foods, and we celebrated this beautiful event together. I was struck afterward not only by the ceremony, but obviously also by the hospitality. And as I have learned now, so many more gifts that were shared with me. All of it was an unexpected gift. The power dynamics of my whiteness and absolute stranger status to all but one were of no concern, and I felt like I was a most welcomed guest. Their hospitality was not pressured. It was seamless and natural. During this time together, we practiced care for each other, spoke thanksgivings, experienced an important ritual and reciprocity. For me, being able to experience this event and now to share it with others. It was sometime in high school, I think, the first time I really learned about building a national identity. At the time, it was likely mostly with primarily the French, as that was the language I studied in school, and the French were among the first people to aggressively seek to codify their language, as well as their culture and identity, which was centered in Paris. Over the course of a century or so, dominant French cultural identity was forced upon the different regions within the country in an attempt to deliver and develop a singular identity, language, and nation state. This impacted various regions like Alsace-Lorraine, Basque, Brittany, and others. France was particularly skilled at codifying the language and requiring it as the language of commerce, and when schools were started, requiring courses to be taught in them. French was the language of politics and social mobility for people as well. The French Academy, the official authority on the French language, was founded in 1635. I remember hearing through word choice the laments of teachers and professors over the years of what had been lost in these efforts. I studied translation in college and graduate school, and there was some sadness expressed about the long-time languages essentially eradicated in many parts of the countries I learned about in the name of commerce and race or ethnicity and class. About the last known speaker of a language, often a First Nations language, and how researchers were doing everything they could to record as much of it as possible before it was completely gone. Although not always with France's level of rigor, other developing nation states across Europe followed a similar pattern for supremacy within their countries as well as their colonies, as did the United States. Cultural supremacy and what we white Europeans and Euro-Americans have often called civilization is actually a legacy of violence, destruction, and continually increasing militarization that permeates through all parts of our lives. Forced to confront their violently problematic histories with their colonies, at least enough for the so-called former colonies, previously their own autonomous countries, to regain independence and autonomy, most European nations have been struggling, held accountable by their former colonies to the atrocities they've committed around the world on the cultures, languages, and in so many other ways, the peoples and the lands they stole and colonized. For a variety of complicated and simple reasons, the United States has not had such a reckoning forced on it or in other ways engaged in any kind of reconciliation with the indigenous peoples of this land. The simplest reason being that white supremacy doesn't allow us to even recognize that what has happened here is ours to take responsibility for. Indigenous or First Nations people have been as disempowered, forcibly assimilated, and killed off through violence or illness as we white people have been able to accomplish. As tribes were separated from the lands of their ancestors and each other, we have further divided and conquered. The tribes who call the Youngstown area home are primarily the Erie and the Wajaje, referred to mostly as Osage, a French name, although other tribes likely traded with them regularly in that area. In researching for this service, web searches came back first with narratives of settler colonizers and their encounters with Indians. No specifics, just Indians. This is another iteration of our national white supremacist narrative, telling history from the colonizer's perspective only, such as needing to defend settler homes from the Indians. You know, the people and territories whose homes settler colonists destroyed. And unlike the people on whose land I now reside, the Tocobaga, the Erie and Wajaje have extensive recorded histories to explore, and I encourage you to do so if you haven't already. The Wajaje migrated westward before contact with colonizers, following warring from the Haudenosaunee, often referred to as Iroquois, a confederacy of 5 and later 6 tribes, whereas the Erie were eventually believed to have been absorbed into Seneca families. The Seneca were one of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And because if we were to teach properly the histories of the peoples native to this land, we ourselves might become empathetic to what white settler colonists have done and disrupt and perhaps even dismantle white supremacy altogether, their stories are suppressed and often made to sound indistinguishable from each other. Indigenous peoples are often referred to in generalities, as my Google search found, and aspects of their cultures, languages, and other aspects of their peoplehood aren't described. They have intentionally been invisibilized by not being represented or taught. In many ways, the indigenous peoples of North America are as similar and not as those from any other continent: Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia. And yet there are some broad strokes we can use to speak about Indigenous and First Nations peoples. For example, that they were usually strong stewards of the lands they lived on and treated life in all shapes and kinds with respect and care. The Indigenous peoples of any particular region adapted to live in relationship with the resources available in their places and learn to understand the many unique beauties that were offered. Indigenous and First Nations peoples tend to live with intention and care for the world around them. In the last couple months, I have been listening to an On Being podcast and started reading Braiding Sweetgrass: Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants by professor, poet, and citizen Potawatomi Nation member Robin Wall Kimmerer. In these works, she shared some perspectives about how First Nations people think and dream, the way life and relationships are centered in their practices, and how they are powerful and distinct from a Euro-American understanding of the world. For example, Dr. Kimmerer writes in Braiding Sweetgrass, Lewis Hyde wonderfully illustrates the dissonance in his exploration of the term Indian giver. This expression, used negatively today as a pejorative for someone who gives something and then wants to have it back, actually derives from a fascinating cross-cultural misinterpretation between an indigenous culture operating in a gift economy and a colonial culture predicated on the concept of private property. When gifts were given to the settlers by the native inhabitants, the recipients understood that they were valuable and were intended to be retained. Giving them away would have been an affront. But the indigenous peoples understood the value of the gift to be based in reciprocity and would be affronted if the gifts did not circulate back to them. Many of our ancient teachings counsel that whatever we have been given is supposed to be given away again. She continues, from the viewpoint of a private property economy, the gift is deemed to be free because we obtain it free of charge at no cost. But in the gift economy, gifts are not free. The essence of the gift is that it creates a set of relationships. The currency of a gift economy is, at its root, reciprocity. In Western thinking, private land is understood to be a bundle of rights, whereas in a gift economy, property has a bundle of responsibilities attached. Dr. Kimmerer reflects on the ways that gifts create relationships and a sense of stewardship of the gift. Because it has been given freely, the recipient must take particular care with it, honoring its inherent worth, respecting it, helping it proliferate, and keeping it moving, further extending the web of relationships. Anything exchanged as a gift grows in value as it is passed from one person to another. The world, then, becomes gifts in motion, she writes. Dr. Kimmerer also writes about the importance of Thanksgiving, small t, in honoring our relationships with each other and the world. And Thanksgiving is offered with care, words, rituals, and reciprocity. When we practice care, we offer thanksgiving. When we call out to our ancestors, our people, any way of life, speak their sacred names, we offer thanksgiving. When we create and practice rituals, we offer thanksgiving. When we do the sacred work of engaging in deep relationship and reciprocity, we offer thanksgiving. First Nations peoples approach relationships with a humility and respect for one another that Western culture generally doesn't practice, hasn't practiced. And this extends to the natural world, for the wisdom it carries that we do not understand, but could also benefit from learning from. Plants and other beings from the natural world offer us many gifts, not just food, if we would make the time to experience and appreciate them. Dr. Kimmerer talks about how when we learn the Latin names of plants, that is often the end of our exploration. We learn how they function, but in a very materialistic way, a very superficial way. Western culture does not encourage us to ask questions like, as Dr. Kimmerer once did, why asters and goldenrod are so beautiful together. Science asks us to remove feeling from our explorations, to remove a primal sense of wonder from the work in the name of objectivity. But it is this same objectivity that disconnects us from the land, others, the land, and the life embodied on it, separates us too from each other, thereby encouraging us to experience life in one particular way, to see the trees without noticing the forest. When we give plants names, we don't listen or pay attention much longer to their songs, Dr. Kimmerer writes. We learn about instead of learning from. Putting First Nations peoples, their practices, their holistic ways of engaging the world at the center of our learning would encourage us to cultivate new, maybe new to us, and other ways of knowing that invite different conversations and thus different learning that might benefit us all. Reminding ourselves through care, words, rituals, and reciprocity, we embody our values, the ways we are connected with each other, the earth, and all that makes life. When things are particularly stressful, the news cycle trauma-inducing, and life more fast-paced than we can keep up with, it can be easy to say that these things aren't important and we want to skip them. But when we do this, we can lose ourselves and each other. Practicing rituals and reciprocity keeps us grounded and in the deep relationships that are life-sustaining and life-giving, something we need all the more when things are rough. It is the relationships with each other, with the land and water, plants and creatures that will last, survive, endure beyond this moment and the next. When we reorient and recenter our lives in this way, we are given what we need, the care and strength to continue on. We might think that this is something that we must do to heal the earth, but the truth is that the earth has no need of us. In fact, she is trying to heal us so that we might survive. And so we must do this for ourselves, for us all, so that we might live. Spirit of breath and heartbeat, life and love, whose presence brings us back to our own. As we have gathered, we give thanks for the possibility of this community, to be among the like-hearted, to witness to our lives and each other. We pray for the world and for ourselves. The world needs more tenderness and care. So together, we start where we are, here in our community, in families by blood and by choice. And we pray and give thanks for the stars and the ladybugs. Spirit, we ask that you hold us in you as we hold each other. May it ever be so.
Down among the weeds and rushes, a baby boy was found. His eyes were clear as centuries. His silky hair was brown. He's never been lonely, never been lied to, never had to scuffle in fear, nothing denied to. Born at the instant, church bells chime, whole world whispering, born at the right time. Me and my buddies, we are traveling people. We like to go down to Restaurant Row, spend those Euro dollars all the way from Washington to Tokyo. I see them in the airport lounge upon their mother's breast. They follow me with open eyes, their uninvited guest. Never been lonely, never been lied to, never had to scuffle in fear, nothing denied to. Born at the instant, church bells chime, ooh, whispering, born at the right time. Too many people on the bus from the airport, too many holes in the crust of the earth. The planet moans every time it registers another birth. But down among the weeds and rushes, a baby girl was found. Her eyes were clear as centuries, her silky hair was brown. Never been lonely, never been lied to, never had to suffer in fear, nothing denied to. Born at the instant, church bells chime, whole world whispering, born at the right time.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts until we meet again.
As you depart, remember the one great truth. You are loved and never truly alone.
All people that on earth do dwell, sing out peace between heaven and hell, between east and west and low and high. Sing peace on earth and sea and sky. Old 100, you've served many years to sing one people's hopes and fears. But we've new verses for you now. Sing peace between the earth and plow. Sing peace between the grass and trees, between the continents and seas, between the lion and the lamb, between young Ivan and young Sam, between the white, black, red, and brown, between the wilderness and town. Sing peace between the near and far, between Allah and six-pointed star. The fish that swim, the birds that fly, the deepest seas, the stars on high, bear witness now that you and I sing peace on earth and sea and sky. All people that on earth do dwell, sing out for peace between heaven and hell, between east and west and low and high. Sing peace on earth and sea and sky. Sing peace on earth and sea